I think it was a little bit of that, seeing the fantasy of this reclamation of a little bit of personal power and developing an idea of who you are, which of course at that age it's all developing an idea of who you are. Just something about like that reclamation of like like that the iconography and like being like cool and capable. That's a very powerful motivator. Like who doesn't want to be kind of cool in some way?
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Whistlekick Martial Arts Radio. Today I'm joined by Kat Connor. Kat, thanks for being here. We're going to have some fun. If you're watching the episode, you can see a whole bunch of pointy things in the background, which may be some foreshadowing of what today's episode is going to talk about. But if you're new to the show, make sure you check out whistlekickmartialartsradio.com for every episode, transcripts that you can search or, find. What did that person say about that? Or heck, maybe you're using ChatGPT and you want to copy a bunch of stuff that past episode guests have said and summarize things. Like there's a lot of cool stuff you can do with that. And I'm glad that we've been doing transcripts this whole time. You know what else I'm glad about? I'm glad for Kataro. You've heard me talk about Kataro before. Kataro makes some of the coolest stuff in the world. KATAARO.com. Now, this episode, when it's being originally, will be in October of 2025. I don't know when you're going to watch it. Kataro will still be cool whenever you're watching or listening to this episode, but they sent over this great belt that I wore last weekend. And it's pink on one side and it's black on the other because it's their breast cancer awareness belt, because October is breast cancer awareness month. And they're running this great promo. 50% of profits from breast cancer related products will be donated to breast cancer research. You can use the code WK10 to save 10% at Kataro. And thank you, as always, to Kataro for their continued support of what we do here at Whistlekick. And I moved that because I'm going to fidget with it, and I'd rather focus my attention on you, Kat. Thank you for being here.
It is a pleasure to be here. I'm glad I was finally able to get on. But yeah, we made it happen.
We made it happen. Sometime, I mean, it's kind of a martial arts thing, right? Like sometimes it doesn't work and you keep chipping away and you keep figuring it out and eventually it happens.
Yep, pretty much. And definitely one thing I've been kind of talking about recently is just how many particularly people in combat sports, but I would imagine probably you could expand that out to martial arts in general. Is a lot of us have a little bit of ADHD, and I think that martial arts is, for many of us, like kind of like possibly the first thing that we ever were able to bring the entirety of our focus to, and I think that's part of why it's so powerful.
I think there's something pretty special about martial arts because in not every drill that we do, and this certainly has some variance by school, but if you've ever done a drill with someone or sparred with someone and not been completely focused on them, it doesn't go well for long.
No,
You're
that
gonna
that
get hit. And
Yep.
even if it's not full contact, it's at least embarrassing that you zoned out and you're like, oh, look at the butterfly. Oh, I should probably pay attention to your foot.
It's like, oops, I messed that one up. Yeah, you get
Yeah.
this sense of kind of instant feedback that is very focusing, I guess you could say.
Mm,
So, yeah,
yeah.
I don't know. That's certainly the way that I conceive of it, and uh, it's always felt like one of the there are two things that I feel like have been able to bring like the entirety of my being into focus on a single point. One is riding a motorcycle way faster than I really should, and the other one is combat sports. Fighting,
Yeah.
getting in the ring, and having it out. Like if you are not 100% present in that moment, it's gonna be a little bit of a problem.
Right.
And
As someone who
also,
also rides, yes, I can attest to that. You can zone out in a car. I think a lot of us zone out a little bit in a car, and once in a while we're brought back to life by the foot hitting the brake pedal and going, "Oh, I was paying attention on some other level," which is kind of cool that we can do that. I don't do that on the bike. If I'm on two wheels,
yep,
yeah,
see
there's very
everything.
little I permit to let distract me. And you're in California, so you are you a lane splitter?
So I moved out here from Tennessee, and we didn't do that in Tennessee.
Oh, no, no. Most
It
places
feels
don't
weird to
do
me,
that.
like
Yeah.
it's like I know I can, but uh, uh, I don't know. I'm just gonna stay over here.
Yeah. Yeah. So your writing experience is closer to mine being in the Northeast
Yeah, yeah.
in Tennessee than it is California. Yeah. Um, did you first start in martial arts because of the desire for focus?
So, so I started. Okay, how do we? We'll run it back.
Yeah.
Yep, there's me.
Rewind the tape.
So I guess you know I started with I picked up karate when I was a kid. I just saw a poster for it in the grocery store. Ninja Turtles, and I was born in the '80s. So kind of coming into awareness. Like in the '90s, you have like Ninja Turtles. You have like ninja movies on TV. You have the Karate Kid. Like being like this cultural touchstone. So like that was just kind of like the thing like in the 80s is people were very into that stuff, and kind of like being a 90s kid, you kind of like inherit that. So I saw the poster one day, in the grocery store, and I took it to mom, and I was like hey, how I showed it to my siblings. I have a younger sister and a younger brother. I showed it to them. They were hype about it. So then I took it to took it to mom, and I was like, I want to do this. Like put us in. Let's give it a roll. And so, like I said, I was 11 at the time. Mom put us in. Little brother, he was a little too hyper, so it didn't work for him at his age. He was like 6. Just kind of like,
Sure.
whoo, like way up there. So he dropped out after about like 2 weeks when it wasn't like full on Ninja Turtles. Sister, she stayed in for probably about 6 months and then just got distracted with like other
Mhm.
things. But for some reason, for me, like it just kind of got its hooks in, and I just kind of like kept doing it and kept doing it, and like I wasn't like super consistent, like because they only had class a couple days a week. It was in like a little small town. The instructor was driving in from far away, but pretty consistently, like week to week, like I was there, and like I stayed active, I stayed engaged, and I enjoyed it. So I think like kind of like planting that seed at that age, just kind of like put me in a position to develop a lifelong love and fascination uh, for the martial arts. Um, so yeah, I'm not 100% sure what I would have been looking to get out of it. Because I don't think as a kid, you're thinking like I'm gonna go learn how to focus really well. Yeah, not most children in my experience, at least.
I
So like I just thought
wonder,
it was cool.
was that was that something that maybe your mom, when you brought her that poster, do you think she had that awareness, or have you talked about it since? Was there were there additional reasons beyond I want to do this?
I think. So I think I'm additional reasons beyond. So like I think I dealt with like a little bit of like I've always been, I figure, a lot of martial artists are like this, kind of introverted, maybe a little bit shy
I've
even.
never heard that
Um,
before. That doesn't describe me at
yeah,
all.
yeah, right, exactly, yeah. So I think kind of being like kind of introverted and shy, and like never been very good at like confrontation or whatever, like standing up for myself. So I think it was a little bit of like that, uh, kind of like seeing the fantasy of this reclamation of like, a little bit of like personal power, and like kind of like developing an idea of who you are, which, like of course at that age, like it's all developing an idea of like who you are, but like just something about like that reclamation of like, of like that, like that the the iconography, and like like being like cool and capable, like that's a very powerful motivator. Like like I was gonna say for a kid, but like even for an adult, like who doesn't want to be kind of cool in some way. Like we don't have to be cool in every way. We don't have to be traditionally cool, but we're cool in our own way. And I think
Yeah.
like later on in life, as I started teaching, like one thing that like I realized, uh, working and teaching kids and teens and whatnot, was that a lot of the kids that you get in martial arts are kind of like the kids that like maybe aren't like the best fit for like team sports. Like maybe they're once again a little shy, a little introverted, maybe even a little awkward. Me too. Maybe even a little awkward. So like, those are the kids that come in to martial arts classes. Those are the kids whose parents like think like, okay, you might get a benefit out of this. We're going to put you in this, and it's a sport that you do for yourself. You proceed at your own pace. You're not gonna like not get the point, and then everybody's gonna hate you. You're not gonna get picked last to be on the team. Like it is 100% like you are in it, and it is something that you do, like in your head and in your heart, and you do it at your pace. And I think that I think that's why it works so well, and why so many people do
Sure.
benefit from it.
So you start at 11, 6 months later, you're the only sibling left training, but somehow you stuck with it long enough that you started teaching.
Yeah,
So if
so
you're
starting at
teaching, that's
11.
not just I'm hanging around for a little bit and I kind of like it. That's I've been here for a while and I really like it.
Oh yeah, that's my life. Like martial arts is my life. Like it is so integral to who I am, that
Mm.
like like if you were to try to separate where I begin and end versus where does this hobby of mine, begin and end, like that they are completely entangled. But yeah, just to kind of like run it back again, right? It's like I said, I started karate when I was like 11, like doing that once or twice a week for about 5 or 6 years. I started to be, an older teenager and kind of wound up getting out of it for just a little bit. I think I was out for like
Yeah.
maybe a year or two, and I was like, wow, I really want to get back into martial arts again. And like first, the martial art that presented itself to me that I picked up was actually was historical longsword fencing. Was the first one that like I kind of like glommed onto, because
And you
I
you
just
had
love the
started in
history.
karate as a kid.
Was
I
that?
heard you say
Yeah,
karate
I
was where
started.
you
I
started.
started with karate. Yep, and then my
Yeah.
first adult martial art was historical European martial arts.
Okay.
So like that kind of like that's how I got back into it after like a very small break, from childhood. Uh, you know, Stayed in that, did that for a long time. Still kind of pick it up off and on, and then I think after a few years of that, like I was like, well, like I want to get, like I wanted to do. I don't know if I wanted to do a combat sport specifically, but I wanted something that like I felt was going to be good for self defense or whatever. Now I'm a young woman out in the world on her own for the first time, so it's like, all right, I want to learn like some self defense. So I kind of like clicked around, like trying to see like what was interesting, and I wound up like kind of like MMA was like kind of like starting to pop off a little bit in the early 2000s. So for whatever reason, that's kind of like where my fascination went. So I started that around that time, and then just kind of kept doing it forever until I built a life around it. Started coaching, started teaching, competing, all of that stuff.
Mm.
So like there's always been, despite the somewhat varied background, there's always been like this like through line of like I am doing some martial art or often multiple martial arts like
Yeah.
concurrently and consecutively, just kind of like staying in it, and that's been almost a daily practice.
So I've got to ask the question because if I heard the timeline on this correctly, I might have to make fun of you a little bit. You wanted to train again and you were concerned you were interested in maybe I should start training in something that is self-defense applicable and then you went into longsword?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I started longsword first actually, because there was a club.
Okay.
I've always
And
liked.
you know why I'm making a little bit of fun of
Oh,
that, right? And in
absolutely.
case
Please,
some of
please
the
explain.
audience out there has, is 3 drinks
100%.
in, I've not, you don't generally walk around with a long sword. And
Not
not to
usually,
say that
no,
those
no.
skills aren't transferable in some ways, but for all the things that Okinawan martial artists get made fun of, you're not going to carry your nunchaku or your sai. You're even less likely to carry your long sword. But
Right.
please
Yeah.
continue, Kat.
Yeah, and so slightly reverse on the timeline there. Like longsword is what I got into first. It's kind of like on the tail end of like I want to pick up a martial art again, and I wasn't thinking necessarily practicality at that point.
Okay.
It
Well,
was
that makes more sense.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, yeah. So it's like slight reverse makes me not seem quite so zany. Which maybe is a bad thing. I don't know. Little zaniness is good. But yeah, so I picked up longsword first. Our rather historical European martial arts, or HEMA, as it's well known now. And like the training methodology, ironically, for a relatively impractical and esoteric martial art, was actually like quite good. It was very much about like sparring and like this kind of experimental archaeology and like reading like these old manuals and like kind of like putting your brain like, okay, like these texts, they're freshly interpreted. Like we're all kind of like figuring it out together. It was like kind of a new martial arts frontier, so that was like really fascinating. But besides that, like it was a lot of like sparring, testing, figuring things out, and trying to kind of like triangulate to accurately recreate like this historical martial art that was written about, like in the 14th, 15th, 16th century, and to bring that back to life. But because that training was so oddly martially focused, it was like, all right, if I had to go fight a duel with this sword, I want to be able to win the duel, so it was almost trained in like this combat sports-esque manner
Mm.
of trying to like find these very practical solutions to the problems that you're encountering, like in a longsword duel. So that kind of like changed my perspective on what I was looking to get out of martial arts a little bit. Gave me new ways to think about like training methodology, and I think that is what grew into kind of an interest in combat sports, and finding like that practical, that real martial art.
Yeah. So we've had a number of HEMA folks on over the years, and it really is fascinating. I'm a self-described nerd. I've never shied away from that aspect of my personality. I'm going to guess that you are as well, because the the folks who seem to really dig if you're not watching, you're missing. The folks who seem to gravitate towards HEMA, most of them talk about it in a way that you're talking about, with this exploration of these old texts, or hey, there's a new translation of this text that just came out and everybody digs into it. And that's not what tends to happen in other martial arts. And of course, some of it is because we've got a cleaner lineage, right, where stuff has been passed down and didn't so much abruptly stop. But let's be real, if that part of it really calls to you, there's plenty of books you can go read. The average martial artist, from what I can see, doesn't read much about martial arts, but darn near all the HEMA folks do. And I
Yes.
find that to be fascinating. So how important was that part of it for you in feeling fulfilled and gravitating towards that training?
So like I might be a little bit weird because like even rewinding back to being a kid and like doing karate, possibly even before I actually started training karate, I think that would be the case actually. Is I would go to the library at school, and they had like a book on judo, a book on
Mm.
karate, like, and they weren't very great books, by modern standards. But like it was a little bit, like here's some techniques, here's the history of this martial art, and like I would read that even as a kid, and I think that's possibly maybe that was a little bit of like the seed to kind of give me that early interest. So I've always been like a reader, and then like grow that up into the quote unquote HEMA movement, right? Because you are recreating something that hasn't existed, on the planet for several hundred years. Like you don't have a master to like kind of like to come in and like help you and be like, all right, this is the methodology that we use. Like I learned it from my sensei, his sensei, da 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 da. It's like I have this book that this guy wrote in the 15th century. Hopefully someone can translate it for me, and then a lot of times these translations are piecemeal. They've gotten better through the years. So it's very much like kind of like bringing your focus into that manual and getting it directly from a historical source. And I think there's something like very very interesting about that, because you're not getting like, oh, like my sensei did it this way, I do it slightly different, just maybe based on just like body type, just how like I'm tall and lanky, this kind of works for me, so I built, like I kind of structured my curricula, intentional or not, around having like this body type, like maybe it doesn't necessarily translate down for everyone. um, but yeah, so yeah, I think HEMA kind of like bypasses a lot of that in a way because like you just have your stack of books, you go in there and you find you put together what you can out of it, and sometimes
Yeah.
they're very difficult to interpret. But like like I said, at the time it was like very much like a new martial frontier, where it's like, all right, we're exploring and constructing this thing together, rather than like it being kind of like already set down and like just handed to you.
Right.
So I think that's intriguing. It makes you feel like you have ownership over it.
Yeah. And I've got a feeling that in the next, probably 25 years or so, we'll look back at this 50-year period of HEMA and we'll be able to draw some we'll be able to make some guesses about the development of other martial arts because that process is going to be roughly the same. We're trying to figure some things out. Here are the tools available. Here are the goals, right? There's a strong seems to be a strong combative aspect to HEMA for me because that's where everybody's testing. Okay, so these are our theories interpreting these books and these limited drawings, and we're going to go in there and just smash on each other with some metal, and we're going to see how that goes, and that helps us understand. Okay, maybe they didn't mean that; they meant this. Oh, that does work better. Maybe that is what they meant, right? And I think a lot of where we are in what I would call more contemporary traditional martial arts, because to me, HEMA is traditional because it's old
As
and
traditional as it gets.
right, like it's kind of traditional. And if we look at something like various styles of karate or taekwondo, less so taekwondo, but let's just say karate, things have been lost. Things have been put aside. The majority of people who taught in the West came out of a very short learning period in the East, right? So we can assume there's some detail lost in the same way that translating a book is going to leave some detail wanting. And I just think, from an academic perspective, that's really fascinating.
Yeah, no, I agree with that, and like it's one thing too that like maybe that you see like kind of possibly as a result of HEMA, or maybe I'm just kind of like maybe I'm just like seeing it from like this perspective. Is I've seen like HEMA people start like branching out into other martial arts and like actually like looking at like Japanese these have these old scrolls of like Japanese swordplay,
Right.
and kind of like trying to one draw like correlations like okay, yeah, if I want to hit the guy with the sword, like then this is a good way to hit a guy with a sword, so it makes sense that they would do it universally pretty much the same.
Right.
But it does seem like a lot of like people that do HEMA and also do Japanese swordplay, or Chinese swordplay or anything like that, will also tend to dig into those scrolls and those sources, and kind of like start to like look at those as well. And I think I feel like I've seen more of that happening online than I would have expected to be happening in like if you just went to like an Aido dojo, for example, because you're getting it directly from your sensei and his sensei and da 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 da. Why would I look at the scrolls? Like I have this guy to teach it to me.
Mm.
But like
See,
now it's like,
people don't
well,
read
maybe
the
that's
books.
yeah. What's that?
They don't read the books. People
Yeah,
don't
they
seem
don't
to
read
want to read
books.
the books.
But like maybe there's something in those books that you're missing. That your
Exactly.
sensei didn't get because he only got it from his sensei. But that's of course all the interpretation.
Right. Are you cross training? I mean, you have non-European swords on your shelf there. So are
Yeah,
you,
so I do not. I don't actively train like any of the Japanese. My interests are mostly European and Japanese. As if you're watching the episode, then you can see that based on what's in my background. But I do not actually train any of the Japanese style sword arts. Like maybe if it was close and available, then like maybe I'd branch out into it. But it hasn't presented itself, and it's not been something I've been interested in enough at this stage in my life to pursue. Though I have uh, a lot of respect for the craft of the Japanese sword. And I know a lot of people like say that, but like no, I have a 600-year-old katana behind me, so like I understand like how they're made, like the materials, the finer details that someone that collects antique swords is gonna see and appreciate. Like I kind of have like that knowledge base, so appreciate them as functional art objects, I guess you could say.
Hmm.
But no, don't actively train with them.
What does training look like for you these days?
So let's see here. So these days, let's see here. So I'm actually like pretty active these days, right? So my latest combat sports martial pursuit is I recently picked up bare knuckle boxing. I had my first professional bare knuckle boxing match, and I don't know how much you actually like have grokked or gotten out of my background yet.
I
But like
actually, and you should know this, and I think most of the audience knows this. I don't research guests ahead of time because the audience isn't going to research. But I can tell you I know enough about bare knuckle boxing to know it's pretty serious stuff, and it's not something that I say this as a compliment that the average person is going to step into and say, this is a thing I want to do and compete in. So we're
yeah,
learning something about you.
yeah. So let's go back. We'll go back from got to talk about swords. So we'll talk about like the next stage in development was
Okay.
picking up combat sports. Like I had seen the UFCs. Actually, my childhood karate instructor like brought them into the dojo and showed them to us
Oh,
one time
cool.
because he was picking up uh, Brazilian Jiu Jitsu as well. It's like like I wound up kind of like seeing these early UFCs with Royce Gracie going in there, and of course we all know how that went.
Hmm.
I was like, oh, okay, that's an interesting thing that's happening. It's like oh, it's like Street Fighter, kind of the video game, like come to life. They're doing it for real. And like at the time, I didn't think it was ever going to be anything that like I would be doing. But like having seen it, that kind of like stayed in the back of my head as something that was out there. And then when I got a little bit older, right, that is when I picked up mixed martial arts. I started doing
Mm.
Muay Thai and Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, and that kind of like ties back into the self defense stuff that we were talking about earlier. It's like, all right, these are supposed to be very practical, tested martial arts. So like I'm gonna do that, right? So I started training MMA, and I you know really just wanted to lose weight and like kind of like learn the skills. And then I was like, well, maybe I'd like to try like one fight. So like I kind of, put in my time, got to the stage to try my one fight, and I came out and like much bigger girl than me, and like this was before weight classes were really a thing. And I come out and I catch her with like two big overhand rights, and bam, bam, and like she goes down, and like I'm looking at my hand like whoa, like it's like, oh, that was cool. Like, oh, I can do it. And then I just
Mm.
kind of like kept doing it and kept doing it and kept doing it. And I've currently had, I think my record is like 35-5 or 36-5 right now. So I've had, like a pretty significant number of fights. Like mostly a little bit of MMA, mostly Muay Thai is my main thing. I was a four-time amateur Muay Thai world champion in a couple different organizations. I was a three-time like national champion in once again a couple different organizations. So I don't think it was a fluke. I think I was in there and I did it and I did it pretty well.
So, yeah. Yeah. It sounds like you train hard and the results show.
It's easy. It's easy
It,
when you love it.
yeah.
But did my thing, and I think like kind of like that interest in combat sports, is kind of like what led me into just kind of like pushing the limits a little bit. It's like, all right, I'm doing MMA, I'm doing Muay Thai. It's like, all right, well, what's next? Like, what do I want to do? Like, what's the next feather in my hat? Like, ooh,
Mm.
this bare knuckle boxing stuff looks interesting. So I just started that, like pursuit relatively recently, and I have just had my first bare knuckle fight, and then I have my next one is coming up in November. And then I'm contracted for at least two more after that. But I think I'm probably gonna win the championship in the organization. So then I'll just keep going until they kick me out, so to
Okay.
speak.
So, you know, um, I personally haven't stepped into any kind of full contact competition, but a number of our audience certainly have. And doing some MMA or kickboxing is something that people are fairly familiar with. I'm going to guess we've got pretty few people out there, if any, who are doing bare knuckle boxing. So, how would you compare that experience? I mean, obviously bare knuckle, there are no gloves, right? We can
Right,
understand
right.
what that is like, but I would imagine that the culture of the events and the competition is also different.
Yeah, it definitely is. Like, and especially coming from like a kind of like a mostly Muay Thai background. That's my main
Mm.
focus. I actually fought in Thailand a couple times.
Mm.
Uh, but like, so Muay Thai has always been like kind of my main focus, and Muay Thai there very much is like this kind of this respect culture that's in there. Like, you don't see like, like kind of like two fighters like getting up and like giving each other like these big stare downs. Not so much. Like a lot of like, Thais are like really goofy and silly when they train. They're just like really really like fun loving people.
Mm.
So like in that kind of, but they're very serious about what they do. They try to turn it on and off. But like there's like this culture of respect that I think is present in Muay Thai, and like you don't see it quite the same way in bare knuckle fighting. Like bare knuckle fighting has a little bit more of like that almost like MMA, like that MMA like attitude.
Mm.
It's like kind of like hardcore, bare testosterone. Like kind of thing to it. It's not really like my favorite vibe per se. I don't like to have like these big like mean mug stare downs. It always feels like really cheesy to me. I don't like a lot of like the trash talk or whatever. That's never going to be my thing. I don't think I'm just not capable of doing that. I understand why they do it for the marketing, but there is a lot of that I think in these more, what would we say, like these like hardcore like combat sports. That you do get like more of like that energy and that vibe. But like for me, I just want to go out there and like test myself, try something different. Like uh, like just wanted to push the envelope. It's like, all right, this looks like it could be interesting. It'll be instructive. I've never punched anyone without gloves on my hand, other than like my siblings, but they deserved it, and we were 10. So I was like, it was that pursuit of like the real, like what would it feel like to, like, am I gonna actually like explode my hand on someone's head? I don't know, like what is that gonna do? Like what is it like to get punched by someone, without a glove in the face at full force with bad intentions? I don't know. So I was like part of like that pursuit of martial truth is what led me into that particular arena. Um, and I hope I have constructed that through line well
Yeah.
enough.
Yeah. Um, I was just checking something because I was trying to remember. My brain was telling me that the person that I knew that I knew of who had spent the most time in bare knuckle boxing was Paige Van Zandt, and Google confirmed that I was correct in that.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. It's
But
definitely. It's
she
definitely
didn't
seems
she
to
didn't
be
do as
catching
well
on.
as you from
Yeah.
what
Like
quickly
it,
popped
it
up
seems to be
there.
catching on a bit more. Like the bare knuckle thing. I think a lot of like previously like MMA centric people have kind of like
Mm.
transitioned into trying a little bit of like bare knuckle stuff.
Why do you think that
So
is?
it's a little bit of like a frontier. Did you say
Okay.
you wonder like why that is?
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think possibly because it allows you to narrow a bit of like your training focus and like dig into
Okay.
this deeper sort of like meta. So like boxing, for how do I put this? So the more that you expand like a tool set that you're bringing into we'll just say competition because that's my main thing. The more that you expand like the tool set that you're bringing into competition, like, okay, I'm doing MMA, right? So I need to be able to like wrestle. I need to be
Mhm.
able to no submissions. I need to be able to do like stand up. My stand up has to like kind of like look a certain way to take into account these like takedowns and stuff that are happening. Um, you know, and bites, but like you take out the takedowns, right? Now you have
Sure.
essentially Muay Thai. So like the stance changes, the techniques that you're throwing are going to like change. Things are going to look a little bit different. But the meta is built around having access to elbows and knees and clinching and all that kind of stuff. Take that out, now you have like
Okay.
kickboxing, so now your meta is going to look different. You're going to get the more, maybe a little bit more like of a sideways stance, almost like American freestyle karate kickboxing that like came out of like the 80s. uh, you change what's happening. The meta changes. Sharpen that all the way down to just like the hands, just boxing, and you're only working with like two tools, but like the meta of using those two tools is incredibly deep. Like even after having been in combat sports for like 20 years, I continue to be like kind of like uh, fascinated with like how deep the level of like these various like metas of these various combat sports can go. You know, and
Yeah.
I think that's one one thing that I think is just really great about martial arts, and why I will sing the praises to the heavens about like why it's the greatest and best hobby that you can ever have in your entire life, is that it is, you know, it is functionally an unattainable skill set, right? Like, no matter how many hours you put into it, no matter how dedicated you are with your practice, like the reality is that you can never master all of it that's out there.
Right.
You can be very good at like certain things, but like you're never going to master all of it. Uh, and by the time you are even starting to be like really, let's say, masterful in your execution or whatever. So like, talk about like Muay Thai or boxing. To use myself as the example, it's like, all right, so like I'm, now in my 40s, I feel like I understand the games very, very well. But also, I'm going to start being at that stage where my physical ability to execute the things that like I hold in my head is going to start to decline. So even as my skill set and understanding goes up, my physical ability is going to start to like, they're going to meet for a little bit, and then they're going to kind of like branch off. And then what do you do there? Well, you take that and you give it to someone else so that they can go further than you did, so that they can get the things out of it that you got out of it, and maybe a little bit more as you kind of put your own understanding into it. uh, and I think that's like just one of like the coolest thing about martial arts is like it can be there for you your entire life. Like, started when I was a kid, doing it in my 40s. I'm not gonna stop. Like I'm a lifer. I'm gonna be doing it forever, and I don't always do the same things. Sometimes go fight with my fist. I'm kind of bored of that. I want to go back to rolling around on the ground. We'll do just some jujitsu. I'm bored of jujitsu. I think I'm gonna go get back into like sword fighting or stick fighting. Like I got into combat shooting for a while. All that kind of stuff.
Yep.
So I'm gonna do that for a while. I don't know, maybe I'll mix them all together a little bit. Like I'm bored of mixing it all together. I think I'm gonna go back to Muay Thai. And you just cycle and cycle and cycle and go through it and go through it.
Right.
Do that for 50 or 60 years. You'll have a good time.
That's for sure. Whenever I talk to somebody who's trained in a number of different things, I find it fascinating where they draw their boundaries between, right? And how they draw their boundaries. Some people draw very thick boundaries. That's over there. This is this. It's almost like they load a program into their brain. Other people feel, I'm never going to be able to keep them separate. I'm not even going to try. And then I think most people are kind of in the middle, and I would put myself in that camp. And when I learn this stuff over here, it helps me get better at this stuff, but I can kind of see where the two are separate. What are you?
So I think like when you are a multiple combat discipline kind of person like I am, like you have to be able to draw a certain amount of like boundaries between them, because the meta that works really well over here, it will mess you up in here. So like I can't
Mhm.
use the Muay Thai optimized stance to go into boxing. I mean, you can, but like I'm not going to be as good at boxing as I could be if I adopted a more like boxing style guard and position. Because it opens up ways that like I can move my head and use my defenses differently, because I don't have to worry about my legs. Uh, so you kind of have to be able to draw a little bit of like those boundaries to be successful in competition. But like when I'm talking about just being a holistic martial artist, right? Like I think there are areas around the edges, taking the sport focus out of it, where things can kind of like
Mhm.
bleed together, and you start to create this cohesive meta of like the way that like you move and uh, like do your do your techniques, but I think actually I like move better. The way that you move like changes when you do
Mhm.
martial arts. Like people will see me like just like walking out in the world. And granted, I am a reasonably athletic looking woman, but people will see me like just like moving like out in the world. And they're like, "Whoa, were you like in the military? Like like you look like like you're a super Somewhat from my favorite compliment. One guy I was passing, going down the sidewalk, and some guy like looked at me and was like, "Whoa, you look like you're like a super spy or something." I'm like, "Super spy? Okay, that's pretty cool." Like I'll
Quite the
run with it.
compliment. I would take that.
But you kind of develop like this way of like moving in your daily life, but also like in your practice, where things just kind of start to
Yeah.
bleed together and kind of change the vocabulary of how you conduct yourself and how you are present in your body.
Hmm.
Sorry, that was a
You
very
talked
roundabout answer. I have a lot of thoughts that like all come out at
all,
once.
you know what? Every answer on this show is roundabout.
All right, good, good, good.
The there's no need to connect the question with the answer. The question just, gets you talking about something else. And
Helps
that's
in.
all my job is. Are you teaching any of these things actively at this time?
Yeah. Let's see here. So I'm, like I help out around the gym a little bit. Like so
Okay.
I was a full
When you
time
say
combat
the gym, which gym?
gym. So
Because are
I'm
all of these things that you do in the same space?
No, no, this is all like, I mean, once again, we're talking like 30, I have like 30 years of combined
Yeah.
martial arts history, so like it's a very, and it all blurs together to me, so I don't necessarily draw very good lines of like this happened then, and then this, and da da da, because it all kind of is happening concurrently as far as I'm concerned. But yeah, like I currently train out of Slick Rick Boxing in Manteca, California, because I'm doing primarily boxing right now, so it makes sense for me to train at a boxing gym.
Right.
Um, and I'll help out a little bit, but since I am back to actively competing, I retired for a little while. After I had my Muay Thai career, I took some time off from fighting, and it's like I just want to there wasn't really any money in like women's combat sports at the time, So it's like I kind of felt like I gotten everything out of it that like I could, and I knew I wanted to be a professional martial artist in some regard, even since I was a kid. Like when I
Hmm.
in the karate dojo, when I'm like 12, it's like I want to be a sensei one day. Guess what,
Yeah.
kid? You did it. You are the sensei. So like so I knew I wanted to be a full time professional martial artist, and I've never had an interest in doing anything else. There wasn't the money in competing. Well, what do you do? Well, I can teach full time, so I did that for a very long time, and then I wound up like COVID kind of like put me out of like
Hmm.
coaching a little bit, like when a bunch of places closed. So I got like a different job for a little while, and like it's never been terribly satisfying, So I wanted to get back into teaching. So I do it a little off and on, but since I'm actively competing now, I I don't like to teach and compete at the same time, because when you're competing, you have to be so focused on what you're doing, getting your hours in, getting your training, that you can't be present for your students in the way that I want to be present for them as a coach. Like maybe I could teach a little on the side, but like it's not really, like I like have like a little bit of a demarcation there, if that makes sense. So I'll have my next bunch of fights, and then I'll probably go back to teaching full time. Or if they pinch me off into teaching at the gym a little bit here and there, then it's fine.
Right.
But yeah, that's kind of where it is now. But yeah, uh,
I've heard competition prep for really any sort of competition, martial arts or otherwise, is kind of inherently selfish, and that's I don't say that in a judgmental way, but it's so singularly focused, and a lot of
yeah,
the other things that people might think are still happening are not happening, and you're talking about that. What what are other aspects of competition prep, of combatives competition prep, that those of us in the audience who've never competed might not understand?
So I think the first thing that like you kind of have to realize, like when you're doing these full contact combat sports, is that like, guess what, kids? It's dangerous. That's very dangerous. Even at the amateur level, I had a training partner of mine back in the mid 2000s that actually got a very bad brain injury in an amateur Muay Thai fight, and she did not wind up coming out of the hospital for it. She had a bad enough brain injury that she unfortunately passed away from it. So it's serious out there. Like you are putting life and limb on the line. Not usually life. Generally it's not quite that serious, but like it can be. And because it can be that serious, it means that you need to be 100% present, 100% present and capable. Like when you step into the ring, like I don't want to go in. If you go in there and like you're not, like you're neither technically ready or your fitness isn't there, then you can get very badly hurt. So you do have to take it very, very seriously. And the side effect of that is that it functionally consumes your life. I usually train 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the evening. Very, very hard training. Like very physically demanding, very technically demanding. I'm not very much fun to be around a lot of times when I'm training that hard, because I'm either in the gym or I'm tired from the gym. I'm napping
Hmm.
before the gym to go back to the gym. I can kind of stuff all these calories in my face, these nutrients in my
Yep.
face at the right times of the day, so that I can be optimized in my training, so that I can be optimized for the fight. So it really does like consume your life. Who you hang out with, what events you go to, if any, what you eat, when you eat it, how you sleep, when you sleep, is just very regimented and very controlled. And it's just a very demanding way to kind of like go through your day-to-day life. I think that's the main thing that like people don't see. And the more serious the combat sport that you're doing, the more demanding it is. Like it's one thing to do, say, like kind of like, I don't know, like maybe ITF, like Taekwondo or whatever. Like kind of like, you're in there, you're doing your thing. But then there's a level up from that. Like maybe you get into like amateur kickboxing. That's more demanding. Get into MMA. Like professional MMA. That's more demanding. You got to be putting in your time, because like it can
Yeah.
be like that. You can have a life changing injury. So I think that's the main thing about competition prep, is just being on it all the time.
Being in the ring, in that competition, you've done it enough that we can probably rule out the nerves that would come from doing it the first few times, right? If I was to step into the ring I've competed, but not at a full contact level. And, like most competition things, most of us, the first few times we do it are the most nerve wracking. I imagine that you never completely shed nerves when someone could punch you in the face, and, people who have passed
Yeah.
away, these sorts of endeavors. But what is your mindset, just before and going into the ring and during the actual fight?
So this is where we'll get a picture of two different cats, I guess you could say,
Mm.
because I do
Okay.
have such a long history in
Mm.
competition, uh, having started literally 20 years ago, and
Okay.
then now competing, in my 40s, as like a very veteran athlete. Um, so very early on, right, like as a fighter, as a martial artist, you're kind of constructing this mythology of yourself in your head, where you are trying to tap into like this level of like personal power, to push yourself further, than like you've gone. So you kind of like have to like, you almost have to like flush yourself, fluff yourself up a little bit, and kind of like believe that you're larger than life. Right, and then, yeah, like you said, you get up there, right, and like you're like, all right, I'm about to go do my first MMA fight or whatever. Um, it's like, and like now it's all about to come to fruition. And yeah, like for me, like very early, or not even like very early, but like through most of my what I might call competitive career, number one, which started in 2004, and then I competed, I think, till 2011 or so, and started coaching,
Mhm.
full time. Uh, like I was terrified before like every fight. Like I mean terrified, if like very literally, like every time I would like get in the ring, right, and like you're going through like your gear check, the referee's like checking you out, they're over there, you see your opponent over on the other side of the ring, and like that like in a few seconds, like you're gonna be, the bell's gonna go ding, and you're gonna be on top of each other, with what I like to call bad intentions, because we are technically trying to hurt each other out there.
Yeah.
It's not vindictive, or with malice, but like, like if I kick you in the jaw and break your jaw, that's just the game. It's a win condition of the sport. So that, like that's very, very scary to like kind of like have in your head when you're out there. So but I think the other side of that is you get, for me, it was always like bell goes ding, right? Fight starts. as soon as I hit them or they hit me, then all of a sudden something changes, and it's just business. It's like, okay, all right, we've made first contact. Hey, guess what?
Mm.
You're actually made out of like meat and blood and bones, just like I am. I know I can get hurt. So that means that you can get hurt too. I get tired. Well, you get tired too. And it's
Mm.
always what you kind of like find through the years is that the opponent that was in your imagination, right? Like the other fighter that you were picturing is going to be there. When you're thinking about like the fight that's coming up, is like, they're stronger than you, they're faster than you, they know everything that you know, they have the counters to all of like your moves. And then like you get there and it's just another meat bag, doing their best. And it's like, okay, all right, this is doable. Like, so that was always, like kind of like overcoming that fear, and then having like that moment, and then like the elation of having done it, and being after, and just like kind of riding that high. It is a really powerful and addictive feeling.
Mm.
So we'll fast forward real quick, right? So then we come to what I call career number two, right? When I got invited to go to, it was 4 years ago actually, around this time. One of the coaches for the Team USA kickboxing, they were getting ready to go to walk WAKO Worlds in Venice, Italy, and they're like, "Hey, Kat, we have a space on the team. Would you like to go to Venice and fight for Team USA kickboxing?" And I was like, "Oh man, I haven't competed in a while, but I'm getting a little long in the tooth, Like, so I might as well have my last hurrah, and like then this is a pretty cool last hurrah." So I was like, all right, yeah, sure, I'll do it. Trained really hard. I think I was like 39 at the time, 38 or 39. Uh, Trained my butt off for 10 weeks. I only had like 10 weeks notice to go from literally the couch in the post-COVID era. Like been
This is
sitting
not
on
like
the
a
couch
couch
for
to
a year.
5K. This is not.
Yeah, yeah, no,
I
it
don't
was
think
seriously.
anybody's condoning this for those of you out there who are riding the couch right now. Please continue.
Yeah, right. It's never too late to come off the couch, but yeah. So it's like coming off the couch, right after COVID, into
Mm.
the gym to go to Waco Worlds, the biggest kickboxing tournament with the United States kickboxing team. It was a pretty cool experience.
Yeah.
But I went and did it. Unfortunately, they put me in the wrong rule set, so I wound up getting a bunch of like points deducted because I was not able to turn off this, because I wasn't able to turn off my reflex to throw knees. You can throw knees in what you call K1 rules, right? But they accidentally put me in low kick rules, and I didn't know that they had messed up my bracket. This was on our team. The coach, like wound up like putting me in the wrong rule set, because it was like, do you want to do K1 or low kick? So I've been training for K1 rules, so like anytime I would clinch up, bang, that knee would come out. Muay Thai, I mean, what are you gonna do? Like, of course I'm gonna throw the knee. And I wasn't able to, on like 3 days' notice, when I got there and saw that they had put me in the wrong thing, I wasn't able to turn off that knee reflex. So I got a crap ton of points deducted just because I couldn't
Mm.
turn off the knee. It just like would bang snap out, and that's a point, done. That's a big deal, when you get points deducted in
Yeah.
a fight. So didn't wind up winning, but it did get me excited about competing again. And it's like, well, all right, I just did this. Uh, maybe I'll go and do another fight and another fight and another fight. So I think, maybe I'll go to Thailand and fight there. So I, did that. Um, and yeah, and now bare-knuckle boxing started calling my name. So it's like, all right, I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna do that too. So but all that being, to rewind that back, right, as a veteran athlete now, someone that's had over 30 fights and pretty solid record, I don't get the nervousness the same way anymore. That the first time I felt that, where it's like, oh, there's no nervousness here, was when I was over there in Italy. I was like, I'm just excited to be here. I'm so happy. I'm like smiling and like nodding at my opponent across the ring. I'm not scared of her. She's a little scared. That's a little nervous of me, which I would be a little nervous to fight me, to be honest. I know how hard I hit, um, but like I was just so thrilled to be there and so excited, and it's been
Yeah.
like that even for the bare knuckle fight, that I just
Cool.
had. I was like, oh, I'm just so happy to be here, and I want to, knowing that I'm in the twilight of my career, not done yet, but I'm in the twilight. it's like I want to appreciate and enjoy every moment that like I'm in there and I'm able to do this thing at this level, and to be still competitive with it and still win. And I want to feel that and appreciate it for how cool it actually is. So fortunately, I haven't had like the nervous butterflies the same way. It was just like I'm doing what I want to with my life. Like what could possibly be better than this?
And that's a good question. You know, I was on an episode earlier, recording an episode earlier today, and I think yours comes out first. But that guest was talking about there's an honesty, there's a truth as we get closer and closer to that kind of real world, as rules fall away, as contact is increased. Do you see it that way? When we consider the breadth of martial arts and your exploration, I think we agreed I could call you a bit of a nerd, right?
100%.
Okay. Nerds like to know things. And, you've talked about how that manifests for you, but being out in the ring, I would imagine if I got through the nerves of it, which would be the biggest part for me for quite a few, I don't know if 30 would be enough for me. Maybe it would. But I dig through that. And on the other side of that, I think there would be a really strong compulsion digging into the understanding because there's a truth to it. I'm coming in there and I'm bringing in this set of experiences, techniques, strategies, and everything. And there's an outcome. And it's kind of hard to argue the outcome. And the more full contact it is and the less rules there are, the more honest that outcome is from throwing these two people in a sort of a blender. Is that, do you see it that way? Or is that just, my musings as someone who's never done it?
No, so I think, like kind of, to answer the question that wasn't asked, but I think
I
like
love
kind of
it. Please, always.
applies, yeah, to kind of applies here. Perhaps one of the things is as I've yeah, early on, yes, like you think about like the kind of like the philosophy of like what you're doing and why you're doing it. It's a very, very big thing in martial arts culture in general. But I think definitely as you get older, and you have been putting so much of your time into this thing, right? Like you start to think very deeply about like these sorts of philosophical truths that you're looking for. So like,
Yeah.
is there a truth on how to throw like a punch? I mean, yeah, I guess so. But like, what is the punch that I throw with my heart is like the real reason I'm here, not just this. There is a reason why we train and like what do you get out of it. So like I think it's normal to like kind of philosophize about that kind of stuff, and that's probably why a lot of us are friggin' nerds. Is because there's always like that bit of understanding there, and yeah, like of course, like when you just get down to just like the two meat puppets, being smashed into each other, certain things are going to reveal themselves to work very consistently, and that is a sort of truth as well, but like I guess the truths that interest me more these days is like why do we do this? Like why am I compelled as a middle-aged woman to go out there and like punch another woman in the face? Like for a game. I'm not even mad at her. I've got no hard feelings about
Mm.
like any of this. But like we're out there like mashing each other up. What is driving me to do this, and what drives any of us to do this? Like what are we really getting out of it? What is the audience getting out of watching it? And I think that kind of stuff is like what really like fascinates me. So, like that's kind of like where my mind is more these
Mm.
days. So when and I guess to answer another question that like wasn't asked, yes, so I'll just keep going like this.
Please do.
Is so like there's like this common, I guess you could call it like a common debate in martial arts, like like oh, I want to have like the real fighting, like what is the real, the realest fighting, what is the most real, I know I keep using that word, but like that is, we all are familiar with this debate that takes place online, all the time, and not just online, even back in like the 15th century. Like you look at like the fencing manuals that like the great masters of longsword fencing wrote, and they'll be like, I'm tired of all these like play fencers that don't understand like real combat. So like this is literally like a centuries old debate in martial arts.
Funny.
So but where I'm going with that, right, is as I've gotten older and I've taken on a more veteran understanding, right? And like when I was younger, I wanted the real fighting. I want to do MMA because I'll understand for real, like what it is, to
Yeah.
get in there and do it. But now I'm like, whatever you take away from like your personal martial practice, whatever it is, like maybe you like to do like I don't know, like we'll say like Choi Li Foot Kung Fu or something, or even like the Shaolin, like Wuxia style, like where it's like very like form centric and
Hmm.
very almost a bit of like a performance art, like the Shaolin monk style. Like if you are getting something out of that like you need, that makes you feel a certain way about like what you're doing in your practice, I think that's great. If you just want to go and do, like point sparring, like kind of like like take the contact out and just kind of like get in there and almost like fencing with your fists and feet, at whatever level you're doing that, I think that's great. Do I care if you can take, like a very specific style of like taekwondo or whatever, like put it in an MMA fight? No, I don't care at all. I care, does that person that is doing that martial art, are they getting what they're looking for out of it? Are they enjoying their practice? And I think that's the realest thing of all.
Mm.
Whether you're doing bare-knuckle boxing or some esoteric longsword fencing system, like if you're getting something out of it that like you need, and then you're able to give that to someone else, like, and kind of create like that bond and that connection, and to have this sense of shared community that we all have with our training partners and with the broader martial arts world. If you're able to get that out of it, like what could be more real for a human being than having a shared community that of something that you're passionate about? Who cares about like like whether you can defend yourself from a guy with a submachine gun on the street if he attacks you, like on a bus or whatever. Like I just like that's I guess that's perhaps relevant for some people, but that's not the truth that I'm looking for out of martial arts anymore.
Right.
Even though maybe once upon a time maybe I would have thought it was.
Mm.
So, like I said, that's a question that wasn't asked, but
And
I
it's
hope
it's
it
a
was
good
interesting.
question to answer, and I'm glad that you did. Are are these bare knuckle boxing matches televised? Would people be able to watch?
Yes, absolutely. Like I said, I just had my first one. It's actually up on YouTube. So I'm fighting under
Okay, cool.
the organization is just called BKB Bare Knuckle Boxing.
Okay.
Um, so they have my last fight up on like their YouTube, and then this next one is going to be televised, I believe, on like Vice TV. They'll put it up on their YouTube eventually, but this one I think is going to be on the main card, so it's going to be on like Vice TV, which goes through like
Some
Hulu and all this stuff. But and then it'll be on like Telemundo, which I guess is a Hispanic television
Yeah.
network, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it's a
So
huge
yeah,
network.
I'm doing it for real. Like it is a real organization. I'm
Oh,
not like
that's
just like
that's
hey girls
great.
in the backyard.
I wasn't I want to be clear. I wasn't suggesting that this was like eight people in a backyard.
Yeah.
Like some of the wrestling promotions that I see these clips of, and it looks like somebody dragged out some mattresses and they put some
Yeah.
cardboard on it, and you're right. Like I'm not proposing that it's that. The question was really, is it visible like while it's happening, or do we have to wait until you're
Yep,
done?
yep, yep. You can see it while it's happening. So my
Okay,
next my next bare
cool.
knuckle fight will be once again through the BKB organization on November 22nd. Is the
Awesome.
next one. So yeah, and it'll be on TV. So if you wanna watch, please tune in. Watch watch me do my thing.
Yeah. Yeah, that
I'm pretty good.
sounds
I'm pretty good, is what they say. Like I've won a lot of fights. So, like I said, probably not a fluke.
sounds super exciting. I'm game to watch. If people want to get a hold of you or follow you, website, email, socials, like what stuff should we be giving out to everybody?
Yeah, so you'll like this actually. So if you Facebook is my main I guess social
Uh-huh.
platform because I like to write like little like in the ring slice of life excerpts kind of the blend
Sure.
like we were talking about earlier the experience of like being in the ring like this moment that happens in a fight with a little bit of like my philosophical musings and try to like tie that up all real nice, which I'm much better doing in writing than I am off the cuff like we are here. But my Facebook page is Kat Connor, fighter, swordswoman, and very scrappy nerd. Is literally the title of my Facebook page. So there's only one me. And then I'm on Instagram. Combat Cat Martial Arts usually is my typical moniker. But if you just look up Cat Connor, martial arts, then like you'll find me all over Google and stuff like that, and be able to see all my socials. I'm a little bit on like TikTok, not so much because
Yeah.
I don't like to make the videos because I'm lazy. But
Hold on.
as
No,
lazy
I
as a
don't.
professional
That word
athlete,
cannot apply to you. That's
yeah,
no, no.
lazy
Maybe you don't
is
like making them, but I can't imagine it's out of laziness.
yeah. No, too much looking at screens drives me crazy.
That
Especially
I can
yeah.
I understand that for sure. Awesome. We're gonna drop all that stuff in the show notes for those of you out there. Make sure you're following Kat. You're checking her out. Watch her fights. Like, hey, this is. We've had a few people on the show that do this sort of thing, and I love when the audience supports. Like, let's go out there. I'm not saying everybody's got to grab the pay-per-view or sign up for some streaming service just for this, but watch your fights. Leave a comment.
Yeah,
You know,
even if you catch it like after the fact,
yeah.
like that's cool. And I think, like I said, as a veteran martial artist now doing like bare knuckle boxing, I'm trying to just bring like a different vibe than a lot of like these fighters have. I want to bring in more of like my philosophical side, and kind of like share that joy and appreciation for the art. So if you like that, then go. I guess like what I do. I don't really monetize anything. I've actually talked about this a little bit on like my Facebook posts. I don't like I'm not ever trying to like sell people crap. Like that's not my thing. I don't want to monetize my love of martial arts. Any more than like I have to. So all this stuff. You can just go check me out and see what you think. See if you like my vibe, then yeah, come on over.
We've talked about quite a few different things today, and I think most of them, at least that I find really interesting, are given the fact that the majority of people who are in this audience are not full contact competitors, right? So we've gotten a little bit of a glimpse behind that curtain, which I really appreciate. Put that to the side for the moment. How should we kind of put a bow on this? What do you want the audience to consider as they're watching or listening to our conversation today? What do we fade out with?
I think my two biggest takeaways and things that I'm glad that we got to kind of like talk about here is, you know, one like just how much martial art there is out there for you to do. Like we talked a little bit about like all the stuff that like I've done. Like all that stuff is I don't know like what level you're whoever may be listening to this is, but like all that stuff is out there for you too. So go and enjoy it. Like live deeply while you live, and love what you do. And then two, the other thing I think putting a bow on it is like just that sense of keep enjoying your martial art for whatever you're getting out of it while you're getting out of it. Like personally, I don't ever like to feel like locked down. I'm not like stuck. I'm not like I'm this style person or I'm a
Mhm.
that style person. Like I see it all as arriving at like a personal sense of like power and truth that is much more important to me, that I think most people would benefit from integrating into their ways that they think about like their martial arts practice at whatever level it's taking place at right now, and wherever it takes you in the future. Just be fully present in it, love it while you can, get out of it what you can, and don't be afraid to explore.